pagar sueldos altos, podremos tirar de ellos hacia arriba.
Claro.
Será posible. Una persona que en España gana 15.000 euros, Daniel, aproximadamente paga 4.500 euros entre cotizaciones sociales e impuestos. El que gana 30, el doble, sin subirle los impuestos, paga más de 14.000. O sea,
Claro.
ganando el doble, aporta el triple.
Aporta el triple.
¿Qué tenemos que hacer? ¿Una sociedad de gente que gane 15.000, es mío, o una sociedad que gane 30.000?
Claro, es que efectivamente, claro, lo que tú estás comentando es, si lo que quieres es tener una sociedad más productiva y que además se financie de manera adecuada los servicios sociales, lo que tienes que tener son empresas más grandes y personas que ganen más. No podemos ser un país en el que la renta mediana sea inferior a la renta más baja del estado más pobre de todo Estados Unidos. Es que es increíble eso, ¿sabes? Es que muchas veces la gente hace asunciones sobre nuestra posición y nos olvidamos del empobrecimiento tan grande que ha sufrido el ciudadano medio al no deflactar los impuestos con la inflación, que ha sido un factor de recaudación, pero de empobrecimiento, y además al mantener un gasto innecesario. Y muchas veces existe la crítica de que, bueno, están hablando de reducir gasto superfluo, pero luego no lo hacen, y no es cierto. O sea, yo creo que es importante también recordarle a la gente que se cerraron con el Partido Popular más de 3.000 empresas deficitarias e innecesarias públicas, ¿no? Y que tenía y tiene un programa de reducción de más de 30.000 millones para embridar las cuentas públicas por un lado y por el otro lado también cerrar ese gap de círculo vicioso de no recaudamos lo suficiente, subimos los impuestos, no recaudamos lo suficiente, subimos los impuestos, ¿no?
Pero es que fíjate, claro, la gente, yo me gustaría que analizasen, y Daniel, de verdad que esto no va de PSOE, PP o de izquierda o de derecha,
te entiendo.
Va de buenos o malos gestores. ¿Qué hacen en Portugal? Bajan los impuestos, crece casi igual que España y tiene superávit.
Eso es.
¿Qué hace el gobierno de España? Sube los impuestos, déficit y además el crecimiento sustentado en el gasto público. ¿Qué hacen los gestores en la Comunidad de Cataluña? Los impuestos más caros, el déficit más disparado. ¿Qué hace la Comunidad de Madrid? Cuadra los impuestos, baja lo que puede y además cuadra el presupuesto. Entonces, al final resulta que es que los que defendemos bajar los impuestos, lo primero que hacemos es mirar el gasto.
Claro.
Miramos el gasto. Vemos lo necesario para las principales partidas. Si hablamos de una comunidad autónoma, sanidad, educación y políticas sociales. Ves dónde puedes reducir de ese gasto que no aporta nada,
claro,
no aporta nada porque se han creado fundaciones, instituciones que no eran necesarias, y con eso dices, como me puedo ahorrar esto, se le...
Y 18 horas central europea, señal en directo que nos llega desde el despacho oval de la Casa Blanca. Ya saben que se ha producido esta tarde un encuentro entre el presidente de Estados Unidos, Donald Trump, y el presidente francés, Emmanuel Macron. Macron, que ha viajado a Washington para tratar con Estados Unidos la implicación de Europa en las negociaciones de paz que ya están manteniendo Estados Unidos y Rusia. Recepción oficial, como decimos en el despacho oval. Donald Trump y Emmanuel Macron atienden a los medios de comunicación.
We've had some very good talks with others, and we're trying to get the war ended with Russia and Ukraine, and I think we've come a long way in a short period of weeks. And the president's been very helpful also. And we're also talking about trade, various trade deals that we will be doing with France, and we'll be discussing a little bit further. Then we'll have a press conference later on. You can ask some questions. We'll be having a press conference in a little while. We're going to have lunch with the entire French staff, and we look forward to it. And again, the relationship's been very special with France and very special with this gentleman on my right, and we look forward to keeping that going for a long period of time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. I want to thank Mr. President for his hospitality. We had a good discussion this morning for G7 here, and for the third year of this war in Ukraine, and I think our common objective clearly is to build peace and a solid and long-standing peace. And this is what we will discuss, obviously, because I have great respect for bravery and the resistance of Ukrainian people, and we do share the objective of peace, but we are very aware of the necessity to have guarantees and solid peace in order to stabilize the situation. I'm here as a friend because through centuries we've been friends, and we are personal friends, as you mentioned it, because we work very well together. And I think the US and France always stands on the same side, the right side, I would say, of history. And this is exactly what's at stake today. And this is a very important moment for Europe as well. And I'm here as well after discussions with all my colleagues to say that Europe is willing to step up, to be a stronger partner, to do more in defense and security for its continent, and as well to be a reliable partner and to be engaged on trade, economy, investment in a lot of topics. So I'm very excited by the discussion we will have, and obviously we will follow up. And I want to thank you again, Mr. President, for your presence for Notre-Dame de Paris. It meant a lot for French people, and I want to thank you for that.
That's the cathedral, and they've done a fantastic job. The president's done a great job in bringing it back. That was a terrible thing, like, what, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Watching that burn was a very horrible sight, and you've done a fantastic job in bringing it back. So I congratulate you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Anybody want to ask a question or two?
Mr. President, have we reached an agreement with the Ukrainians on the critical minerals deal?
It looks like we're getting very close. The deal's being worked on, and we're, I think, getting very close to getting an agreement where we get our money back over a period of time. But it also gives us something where I think it's very beneficial to their economy, to them as a country. But, you know, we're in for $350 billion. How we got there, I don't know, but that's a lot of money, a lot of money invested, and we had nothing to show for it. And it was the Biden administration's fault. The Europeans are in for about $100 billion, and they do it as in the form of a loan. And the Europeans have been great on this issue. They understood it wasn't fair, and we were able to work something out. But with the Ukrainians, I think I can say that we're very close. Scott's around here someplace, and I think we can say that we're very, hi Scott, I think we're very close. Do you have something to say about that, Scott?
We are very close.
Good.
1 yard line.
All right, good.
Mr. President, any security guarantee for Ukraine?
What?
Would a minerals deal include a security guarantee for Ukraine?
Well, it'll be, Europe is going to make sure that nothing happens. I don't think it's going to be much of a problem. I think once we settle, there's going to be no more war in Ukraine, and you're not going to have it. It's not going to be a very big problem. That's going to be the least of it.
In Greek media reporting that the U.S. has agreed to shut down a military base in Greece that's been a logistical hub for NATO.
That who shut down?
That the U.S. has agreed to shut it down at the request of Turkey and Russia. Is that all true?
Marco, do you have anything to say?
Sure, that's a no. That's a no.
Mr. President.
Is it a no?
It's a no, sir.
It's not a correct story.
Thank you.
Mr. President, how do you react to people in Europe who say that you are abandoning Ukraine and that you are going to sacrifice the security of Ukraine by making a deal with Vladimir Putin?
Now, we're helping Ukraine like nobody's ever helped Ukraine before. And I can say this, if I didn't become president, Ukraine would right now still be at a level where there would be no even thinking about a peace. And it was, it's a sad thing that this happened. This would have never happened, this war, if I were president. Zero chance. And it has happened. So my function is to get you out of the war, get them out of the war, let them live. It's a bloody war. It's a horrible war. Thousands of people are being killed a week. And I would say Russia, maybe 700,000 people. I think Ukraine probably a similar number. And that's not talking about the towns and the cities that have been blown up. That's talking about soldiers. This has been a horrible, bloody mess. And we're going to get it solved. We got to get it solved. And you know, we're not talking about America's soldiers from this country. We're talking about Russia and Ukraine. But on a humanitarian basis, we have to get this very, very bloody, savage problem solved. And I will say this also, it could lead to World War III if it's not solved. You know, there'll be a point at which it's not going to stop at those two countries. Already there's such involvement from other countries. And it could really lead to a very big war, World War III. And we're not going to let that happen either.
Would you support the idea to send European troops in Ukraine to back the
The
ceasefire?
European troops may go into Ukraine as peacemakers. So when the agreement is done, they can watch that everything's followed properly. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And a lot of the European countries, I don't want to speak for France, but I know that the presidents talked about doing that also. I think that'll be a very good day when we can go on as peacekeepers as opposed to what's going on right now with everybody being killed.
Will they have US backing, those troops going into Ukraine? Will they have US backing from US troops?
Well, we're going to have a backing of some kind, and obviously the European countries are going to be involved, and I don't think you're going to need much backing. I think that's not going to be a problem. Once an agreement is signed, Russia's going to get back to its business, and Ukraine and Europe are going to get back to their business. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Mr. President, will you meet with President Zelensky soon?
What?
Will you meet with President Zelensky soon?
I will be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final deal. It'll be a deal with rare earths and various other things, and he would like to come, as I understand it, here to sign it, and that would be great with me. I think they then have to get it approved by their council or whoever might approve it, but I'm sure that will happen. Yeah, at some point I'll be meeting with President Putin also, yes. I don't know when we speak. We're trying to get this thing worked out, but yeah, at some point I'll be meeting with President Putin too.
Monsieur Macron, s'il vous plaît, est-ce que vous pouvez dire quelques mots en français?
I can say a few words in French. No. Le président l'a dit, je pense que c'est un moment important. C'est un moment important de la discussion. On veut bâtir la paix en Ukraine et le bilan qui a été rappelé, en réalité, il y a d'1 million de morts et de blessés depuis le début de ce conflit et de cette guerre d'agression. Notre volonté, c'est que cette paix dure, parce que nous avons déjà eu un cessez-le-feu et une paix qui n'a pas été respectée. C'était les accords de Minsk, 1 puis 2. Et donc le corps de cette discussion, c'est de s'assurer d'abord qu'il y ait un cessez-le-feu, ensuite que les Ukrainiens soient impliqués. Je pense que ce que vient de dire à l'instant le président Trump est très important, c'est-à-dire qu'il va rencontrer rapidement le président Zelensky pour signer cet accord sur les minerais critiques et les terres rares, et que c'est aussi un moyen d'avoir une implication américaine forte. Les Européens sont prêts à prendre leur charge sous des formes diverses de soutien à l'armée ukrainienne, de présence, y compris pour s'assurer que la paix soit durable. Et l'implication dans la durée des États-Unis d'Amérique à travers cet accord est une bonne chose. Et donc tout est encore à construire. Et je ne veux pas préempter les discussions. Mais nous partageons le même objectif. Et ce qu'on a discuté ce matin, pendant 1 heure après la visioconférence ensemble, est-ce qu'on va continuer de travailler, et sont pour moi des bonnes avancées. Et l'annonce
Est-ce que l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine est encore un objectif crédible?
Spoken about this just a moment ago. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to build peace with Ukraine. As President Trump mentioned, there are already 1 million dead and wounded in Ukraine since the war began. We had a ceasefire in the past that was not respected. This was under the Minsk Agreements 1 and 2. President Trump, as he said, will be meeting with President Zelensky to sign a deal on rare earths. And we are pleased to see this very strong American involvement. Europe, of course, also stands ready to support Ukraine in various ways, supporting its military. And we don't want to preempt any sort of discussions that are currently underway, but we do share the same objective of building this lasting peace.
I just want to tell you a little story. So we were at the Eiffel Tower having dinner with your wonderful wife and with my wonderful wife, and we came out and he started speaking the French deal. And we didn't have an interpreter, and he was going on and on and on, and I was just nodding, yes, yes, yes. And he really sold me out, because I got back the next day and I read the papers. I said, that's not what we said. He's a smart customer, I will tell you that. Sure.
Exactly what we agreed. Mr. President, you called Zelensky a dictator. Would you use the same words for Vladimir Putin?
I don't use those words lightly. I think that we're going to see how it all works out. Let's see what happens. I think we have a chance of a really good settlement between various countries. And, you know, you're talking about Europe, and you're talking about Ukraine as part of that whole situation. the other side has a lot of support also. So let's see how it all works out. It might work out. Look, you can never make up lives. The one thing you can make up the money, but you can't make up the lives. A lot of lives lost. I think probably a lot more lives than people are talking about. It's been a rough war, but I think we're close to getting it solved. Go ahead.
Doge, do you think that Doge could benefit from more streamlined communications? There was that email telling employees to do 5 things that they've done last week. Agency has then told people to ignore it.
You're talking about the last email that was
Yeah.
sent, where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great, because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows that they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. They're trying to, that's how badly various parts of our government were run by, and especially by this last group. So what they're doing is they're trying to find out who's working for the government. Are we paying other people that aren't working? And where is all this? Where's the money going? We have found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud so far, and we've just started. We're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold, tons of gold.
Some of the agencies.
So I think it was actually, there was a lot of genius in sending it. We're trying to find out if people are working. And so we're sending a letter to people, please tell us what you did last week. If people don't respond, it's very possible that there is no such person or they're not working.
Some of the agency has instructed their employees not to respond. They were waiting on further guidance, but Elon Musk's tweet said failure to respond would be taken as a resignation. So there's been a disconnect in communications.
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all about
Only,
that?
no. That was done in a friendly manner. Only things such as perhaps Marco at State Department, where they have very confidential things, or the FBI, where they're working on confidential things. And they don't mean that in any way combatively with Elon. They're just saying there are some people that you don't want to really have them tell you what they're working on last week. But other than that, I think everyone thought it was a pretty ingenious idea. We have to find out where these people are. Who are they? And we said, if you don't respond, we assume you're not around.
That holds, that stands.
And you're not getting paid anymore, too. So, we're doing a real job. And we just had a poll come out, I guess the Harvard poll, saying that it's massively popular what we're doing.
Mr. President, do you still believe in NATO, in the alliance between Europe and America in NATO? Are you going to
NATO
the summit in June?
is very much involved in this. When I first got elected at the very beginning, first term, I got hundreds of billions of dollars put into NATO. NATO had no money because they hadn't paid for years. And I said, look, if you don't pay and we're not going to be a part of NATO, we're not going to protect, we're not going to do what we're supposed to do. And we took in hundreds of billions of dollars into NATO. No, NATO is a good thing if it's done properly and if it's used properly.
Mr. President, in these days you speak a lot about tariff in Canada, in Mexico, and in Europe. I want to know what is your idea about Italy, if you want to make the same thing.
What? Can you talk up a little bit?
In these days.
No louder. Can you talk a little louder? You have a beautiful voice, but you're not.
In these days, you speak.
Where are you from?
Italy.
From Italy. Oh, I love Italy. Go ahead.
I want to know if you have the same idea with Italy about tariffs.
Well, look, I love Italy, and Italy is a very important nation. We have a wonderful woman as your leader, and she was on the conversation today, one that we had, the G7. And I think Italy is doing very well. I think Italy's got very strong leadership with Georgia.
Monsieur le Président, qu'est-ce que vous répondez au président Trump qui a dit que les Français et les Britanniques n'avaient pas acheté?
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify what you meant in your truth today on the major economic development transactions between the U.S. and Russia? Any more detail?
With respect to what, Russia?
In solving the peace deal, you said there will be major economic development transactions which will take place between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, we're trying to do some economic development deals. They have a lot of things that we want, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know if that will come to fruition, but we'd love to be able to do that if we could. They have massive rare earth It's a very large, it's actually the largest in terms of land. It's by far the largest country. And they have very valuable things that we could use, and we have things that they could use, and it would be very good if we could do that. I think it would be a very good thing for world peace and lasting peace. Well, I mean, our first, by far, our first thing that we want to do, the first element of the overall transaction is ending the war. But if, just as we're doing with Ukraine, if we could do some economic development in terms of Russia and getting things that we want, something like that would be possible, yes.
Mr. President, Mr. President.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Can you explain the rationale in having the U.S. vote against the UN resolutions that Ukraine proposed and also the U.S. proposed?
I would rather not explain it now, but it's sort of self-evident, I think.
Mr. President, what about increasing the tariffs on products from the European Union? Is that still something you want to do today?
Well, it's not increasing, it's reciprocal. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. So it's not a question of increasing. If they charge us 20%, we charge them 20%. If they charge us 30 or 40%, then we do that too. So that would be on European Union, but that really would be with respect to everybody. It's reciprocity. So reciprocal, whatever they charge us, we charge them. Nobody has a problem. Even you, as the you, don't have a problem.
Mr. President, are you thinking of going to Moscow soon, maybe in May for the 9th of May for the anniversary?
I mean, not soon, but I would be certainly, if this all gets settled out, which I think it will, sure, I would go there.
On the 9th of
And
May?
you'd come here too.
On the 9th of May on the Red Square?
I don't know, 9th of May, no, I think that's pretty soon. But no, at the appropriate time, I would go to Moscow.
When do you think the war will end?
I think the war could end soon.
How soon?
Within weeks.
Weeks?
Yeah.
At what price for
Do
Ukraine?
you think so? I'd like to ask that you. I think we could end it within weeks if we're smart. If we're not smart, it'll keep going and we'll keep losing young, beautiful people that shouldn't be dying. And we don't want that. And remember what I said. This could escalate into a third world war. And we don't want that either.
Mr. President, your envoy Steve Witkoff suggested a temporary ceasefire in the conflict, but the Russian government has denied that out of hand. Do you worry that they're not dealing in good faith?
No, I think they, at some point, will agree to that. I think they probably wanted to. And I think once you have a ceasefire, it's going to end because they're not going from a ceasefire back to war. I think people have had their full. I'm just glad I was able to help because there was no communication with Russia until I came along. Biden didn't communicate. He couldn't communicate with his own child. So Biden didn't communicate. He couldn't. It was terrible. He hadn't spoken to Putin in 3 years. You're trying to end the war. People are being killed. Every week, thousands of people are being killed. Soldiers, in this case, mostly. Also towns, as missiles go in and back and forth. No, it's a shame. This should have never happened. This is a very sad, this is going to go down to the history books. This is a very sad moment because that should have been stopped. That should have never started. And if it did start, it should have stopped the first week, not 3 years later. Okay?
Je vais répondre sur l'homme Juste, je pense que plusieurs questions de votre collègue qui ont été posées en français et qui rejoignent les questions posées par les collègues américains. D'abord, cette discussion est utile et construire la paix est une nécessité. La deuxième chose, c'est qu'il y a aujourd'hui une capacité de dissuasion qui est restaurée et que c'est ce que veut dire le président Trump quand il dit qu'il n'y aura plus de problème. Je pense que la force du réengagement américain aujourd'hui, c'est en quelque sorte l'incertitude aussi pour le président Poutine. Et donc il y a une capacité de dissuasion qui est là, qui permet de sceller d'abord sans doute une trêve, la capacité à vérifier que cette trêve est respectée, et ensuite un accord de paix qui permettra de reconstruire l'Ukraine et de lui apporter aussi les garanties de sécurité. Dans le cadre de ces garanties de sécurité, nous pensons que nous avons notre rôle à jouer. Et donc, on verra à ce moment-là de la discussion, je ne veux pas la préempter, ce qui est nécessaire pour que l'Ukraine puisse rester un pays souverain. Et d'ailleurs, dans les discussions entre l'Ukraine et les États-Unis d'Amérique, il y a cette question d'une souveraineté ukrainienne qui est respectée. Et donc, nous, ce que nous avons préparé, en particulier avec nos partenaires britanniques, dans le cadre d'un travail très étroit qu'on a mené ces dernières semaines, et partagé avec tous les pays européens et alliés qui sont prêts à s'y joindre, c'est l'idée de dire on est prêt à apporter ces garanties de sécurité. Les conditions, elles doivent en être définies. Elles doivent être définies par l'accord. Ça peut aller jusqu'à l'envoi, comme l'a dit le président, de troupes qui iront observer que la paix est bien respectée, qui iront se positionner, pas sur la ligne de front, pas pour justement, en quelque sorte, être dans le conflit, mais marquer une présence comme une garantie. Il y a d'autres moyens de soutenir qui peuvent être des soutiens accrus et capacitaires à l'armée, des structures nouvelles. Et je pense aussi que l'accord qui est discuté, le président l'a dit, la crédibilité américaine qui est mise dans ce moment, c'est aussi montrer que chacun est dans son rôle, mais que nous avons une unité, Européens et Américains, et donc avec une forme de garantie que les Américains prennent par la discussion sur les minerais critiques qui sont en train de finaliser.
That is the most beautiful language. I have no idea what he's saying, but that is the most elegant, beautiful language. Go ahead, please.
This is a question that was asked by several. What we need to do is make sure that we are building peace. We have deterrence capabilities that have been restored. As President Trump said, there won't be any more problems. We've seen the U.S. re-engagement and the message that that sends to Mr. Putin. We have deterrence, which will allow a truce to take place, verification of that truce, and then a peace agreement can be put in place so that we can start rebuilding Ukraine with security guarantees. And we have a role to play in that. Again, I'm not preempting any discussions, but we've spoken about Ukraine's sovereignty, and that has been a subject of discussion between the U.S. and Ukraine. We have also been working closely with our British partners this week. We've shared this information with other European countries, and we are ready and willing to provide those security guarantees, which could perhaps include troops, but they would be there to maintain peace. They would not be along the front lines. They would not be part of any conflict. They would be there to ensure that the peace is respected. Our assistance may include other capacity building, perhaps for the military. We see U.S. credibility here. We each have our roles to play, but we will be done in a united fashion.
Mr. President, do you think that Ukraine should give up a part of its territory?
Well, we're going to see. It's a negotiation that's just starting, and they've been fighting, and there's been a lot of land that's been taken. So we'll have to see how that works out. That's part of the negotiation. I will say there was great unity in that room today, via Skype or whatever. But there was great, tremendous unity today in that room with the other countries.
Ukraine wants their territories back. Can they take it back? What they lost in the past years?
That's not an easy thing to do, is it? Right? It's not an easy. Just asking whether or not you can take back the land that they lost. And I say that, yeah, perhaps some of it, yeah, I hope so. But that's not an easy thing to do.
But not everything.
It's going to be something we're talking about.
Will you convince Vladimir Putin to accept the European troops as peacekeeper, would you think?
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept
I've
that?
asked him that question.
You talk to him?
De esta forma es como termina, como concluye esa rueda de prensa conjunta que han ofrecido Emmanuel Macron y Donald Trump en esa visita oficial que el presidente francés está realizando a Washington para hablar de las conversaciones de paz que de momento se están celebrando entre Rusia y Estados Unidos y de las que quiere formar parte Europa. Macron, que ha llegado a Washington pues como liderando, por así decirlo, la postura de la Unión Europea, del club comunitario. Esta ha sido la reunión, la rueda de prensa previa a la reunión. Ahora se está celebrando la reunión y después de la misma, en principio, volverá a haber otra comparecencia ante los medios de comunicación por parte de Trump y de Macron para ver si se ha producido avance. De momento, sintonía entre ambos mandatarios en la idea de enviar tropas de paz europeas a Ucrania. Estados Unidos, Donald Trump dice que no ve ningún problema y Francia, Emmanuel Macron, pues ha sido uno de los líderes comunitarios que ha defendido esta postura, aunque dice que esas tropas europeas de paz no tendrían que estar en primera línea. También han hablado ambos y han mostrado cierta sintonía en torno a esas negociaciones que está llevando a cabo Estados Unidos con Ucrania sobre el acuerdo en clave de minerales y de tierras raras que tiene Ucrania. Por lo demás, otro de los titulares que ha ofrecido el presidente de Estados Unidos es que el 9 de mayo le parece demasiado pronto para reunirse con el presidente ruso, con Vladimir Putin, pero dice que está convencido de que se alcanzará la paz en esta guerra que hoy cumple 3 años muy pronto. Pues así terminamos esta señal en directo, pendientes ahora de la próxima comparecencia que ofrezcan Emmanuel Macron y Donald Trump.
¿Sabes lo importante de tener la mejor información para la toma de decisiones? ¿Sabes? En esas reuniones privadas en las que se ve una información clave para poder luego tomar esa decisión. Es lo que queremos en el club al que te invitamos ya, en el club en el que Negocios Televisión lanza para que puedas tener toda la información, la mejor información y tomar las mejores decisiones. ¿Cómo crees que va a evolucionar el euro en un entorno en el que todo el mundo inversor piensa que camina hacia la paridad? ¿Cómo le va a afectar el fenómeno Trump? ¿Cómo le va a afectar al conjunto europeo? Inscríbete aquí abajo.
Muy buenas tardes. En los siguientes minutos vamos a hablar con Ivo Daalder, is former U.S. ambassador to NATO and CEO of Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Nice to meet you.
Good to be here.
Thank you for being with us today. One of the most repeated themes here has been to increase investment in defense. Most of NATO countries are focused now on reaching the 2%. When do you think it will become general to reach the 5% of GDP in defense?
I really don't think we're ever going to get to 5% of GDP. That is a kind of level that we didn't have during the Cold War when the threat was significantly larger. The big problem that Europe faces really isn't the 2 or 3 or 5%. It is that over the last 25 years or so, Europe has not invested enough in defense. And as a result, the gap between what it could be able to do and what it needs to be able to do, what it can and what it needs to do is growing. And that will take money to address, at least money for the next 3 to 5 years at a significant level, probably over 3% of GDP, in order to recoup the loss of investment and the loss of R&D that we've had in the past 25 years. We've moved from a situation where we thought in Europe that we lived in peace to, frankly, a situation where we're living in a continent at war. And that war is not just in Ukraine. It is also coming increasingly to the countries of Europe itself through cyber attacks and assassinations and cuttings of underwater cables. That's war just by another name.
You think Europe is on time to reach this level?
Well, we should have done it 10 years ago. And really in 2014 when the threat became evident with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The reaction should have been much more strongly to say, 1, this is unacceptable, and 2, if they get away with doing what they did, and by the way, they've gotten away with it, Crimea is still in Russian hands, that threat is just going to grow. And our friends in Eastern Europe would tell us that, and we would sort of say, yeah, but not really. And that's true in the United States, it's true in Europe. But we should have at that point done what we are doing now. Had we done that, we wouldn't be in the situation where we are today, where we have to expend extraordinary resources in a relatively short period of time to get the forces necessary to deal with the Russian threat.
You talked about Crimea. You think it will be continuous in Russian hands?
I think it's at the moment, it's hard to see how you're going to create the military counterforce necessary to enable Ukraine to reconquer Crimea, at least without a significant outside military intervention. And one thing is clear, neither the United States nor European countries up to this point believe that they should involve themselves directly in the conflict. I think that is not going to change. It's possible if you have a peace agreement or a ceasefire and the war then restarts that you would come back in that way to say, you know, we now learned our lesson. We have to finish this war in the right way once and for all. But I think for now, much of the territory that Russia has in its hands will for the foreseeable future remain in Russian hands. What's important is for the world not to recognize that as Russian territory. It's Ukrainian territory occupied by Russia.
Important that von der Leyen has said the European fiscal rules could be frozen to increase defense spending. Why do you think this change of opinion now?
So I think von der Leyen's speech yesterday here at the Munich Security Conference was extremely important, because there have been two things that are preventing Europe from doing the right thing. One is the perception of the threat and the degree to which the environment is challenging. That's changed, and I think most Europeans understand there's a real threat. Something needs to be done. The other problem has been money, because of fiscal rules under the European Union that only a certain amount of debt can be held. There's a particular German problem with its own debt break, which I hope after the election will also break free. But by saying that defense spending is not going to count against deficits under the fiscal rules, a proposal, by the way, that I know that the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis has made, that Giorgia Meloni has made. I'm not sure whether the Spanish government has Sanchez, but whether he has proposed it. But it is an important proposal, as is the idea that Europe should borrow to fund common defense projects. I think that those two things can help meet the moment, and the moment is more defense capability in the shortest possible time without having to necessarily rely on the United States to fill all the gaps.
Well, in the Spanish case, the Spanish government says the 2% of the spending in defense it's to 2029. So we are a little late, maybe.
Very late, and I think it's important that there be a debate in Spain about the reality of the world that we're living in. And that world is one in which we have a country in Europe that is at war with Europe. It may not be shooting missiles at Madrid. It is shooting missiles at Kyiv, but it is preparing itself to be ready to fight all of Europe. And to be an ally, to be a good ally, means that if one of your allies gets attacked, it's important for you to be able to help defend it. More importantly, the way to prevent it from being attacked is to be prepared to win. And in order to do that, Spain will have to spend more on defense.
J.D. Vance speak yesterday here in Munich, seemed a little bit to attack Europe. In fact, Kaja Kallas later said that it seemed like the U.S. vice president wanted to fight a little bit, but what do you expect from the U.S. and Europe relationship with this Trump's administration?
I'm deeply pessimistic. I think that President Trump himself does not believe and never has believed in alliances. He sees them as burdens rather than as benefits. He has long accused European and Asian allies of the United States of taking advantage of the United States. This goes back to the 1980s. This is nothing new. And I don't really think that he is a man we can rely on to fulfill the commitments of the NATO treaty. And I think the Vance speech sort of underlined their disdain for Europe, strange disdain, by the way, for a person to come and talk about the crisis of democracy in Europe, that coming from a person who still refuses to recognize that Joe Biden won the election in 2020. So it's a little strange to be lectured by these kinds of people about what democracy is about. But the fact that he chose to do so just demonstrates that this is not the kind of friends that you want to rely on or can rely on, and that's very unfortunate.
What do you thought yesterday listening to J.D. Vance?
Well, in some sense, I wasn't surprised, because this is the kind of arguments and rhetoric that we've been hearing in the United States for quite a while. there's a media environment now with X and right-wing, far-right media that talks about all these stories and to talk about the enemy from within, which, by the way, Donald Trump talked about too in his campaign, and he's now trying to take that enemy without. It is a little disconcerting for those who have a sense of history that J.D. Vance talked about the enemy from within, a phrase that comes out of fascist and Nazi rhetoric in the 20s and the 30s, and indeed, of all places, in Munich, which is the cornerstone, the beginnings of where the Nazi movement started. One would have thought that a vice president of the United States might have been a little bit more careful both with his language and the venue for making this case.
Ukraine has been the center of the debate here in this Munich conference. So what other topics do you think are the most relevant in geopolitical matters now?
Well, there's always China, and there's the relationship between China and Russia, and the degree to which there is either a possibility of splitting them or finding ways to put pressure on China not to support Russia and its war. But I fear that the big question, as always, for the last few months is not Russia, it's not China, it's the United States, and the question whether the United States, in 76 years, where it has been a steadfast ally within NATO, will continue to be that. And I think a lot of people that I'm talking to are starting to worry that maybe that era is coming to a close.
Ivo Dalder, former U.S. ambassador to NATO and CEO of Chicago Council of Global Affairs. Thank you very much for talking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends.
Vosotros estabais hace una semana liando la parda. Y ahora, no, ahora hay que sobrevivir 4 años.
Fomentarla ni la van a fomentar.
Se comenta con bastante alegría.
¿Qué estás diciendo sobre el gobierno?
Resistir y resistir y resistir.
Y hay bastante fake news y bastantes rumores falsos.
No todo es chorradas climáticas. Eso lleva a la deuda pública española a una situación de insostenibilidad.
Deje de gastar.
Siempre dicen que voy a empezar una guerra. No voy a empezar una guerra.
¿Quién va? Yo no voy, yo no voy.
Se habrá sorprendido de lo bien que lo hacíamos ya, ¿no?
Que todos los diputados que están en el Congreso en este momento, todos,
no ocultéis el malestar brutal de la población. ¿Y qué pasa a partir de ahora?
We're going to make America great.
8:13 de la tarde. Good afternoon, Cathy Booth. Venga, venga, que es gratis, que es gratis.
esto es tendencia.
La mirada a la actualidad, la sucesión de acontecimientos.
Esto es de locos, ¿eh?
Pues ya, céntrate.
Esto es una historieta, que no estoy diciendo que sea falso.
Tiene mucho que explicar.
Pero bueno, eso va a cambiar.
Thank you very much, Jose, and good day to you too.
¿Dónde está tu cara?
Bienvenidos de nuevo a Negocios Televisión.
Bueno, oye, os estoy formando.
Buen día y buen negocio.
Cuando era muy joven, cuando era un niño, recuerdo que una de las cosas que me gustaba hacer era comunicar, explicarle a todo el mundo en mi escuela, en mi mundo, lo que hacía, y monté una especie como de fanzine, de pequeña publicación en la escuela, era un niño, y a esa publicación le llamé salida de emergencia. Me ha acompañado siempre eso de la salida de emergencia durante toda mi vida. Ha sido en columnas, ha sido en medios, ha sido en todas partes, pero también ha sido en la radio y ahora lo tenemos en televisión. Hoy empieza mi podcast en Negocios TV, salida de emergencia. Estaba explicando para los espectadores de Negocios TV y también para los que estamos en mi canal, esto es una emisión en dual. Cuando, como os decía, cuando era pequeñito, cuando era muy joven, me gustaba comunicar y de hecho una de las cosas que siempre tuve o que quería hacer era crear una especie de canal de comunicación. Cuando era un niño, evidentemente, lo único que podía hacer era una especie de fanzine, un boletín. Ese boletín se llamó Salida de Emergencia y lo repartía yo mismo por todas las partes que había en el instituto, ¿no? En aquella época. Desde entonces, esa definición, ese nombre de salida de emergencia me ha acompañado siempre. Me ha acompañado en columnas en medios de comunicación, me ha acompañado en la radio, me acompañará ahora en televisión. Aquí en Salida de Emergencia, en el podcast que vamos a hacer cada lunes de 8 a 9, hasta ahora lo hacíamos solamente en mi canal, en un formato mucho más reducido, pero aquí ahora vamos a traer gente importante, vamos a traer gente que tiene cosas que explicar. Fundamentalmente, que tengan que explicar algo que no se explique normalmente en otros lugares, ¿no? Ayer, por ejemplo, cuando analizábamos las elecciones alemanas, ¿no? Durante toda la tarde-noche de los resultados que había, los titulares, los mensajes que la oficialidad estaba trasladando eran los de siempre, ¿no? Era ese mensaje habitual de que las cosas están cambiando, que las cosas están viniendo. Y fundamentalmente, una de las cosas que ayer pasaron y las cosas que no han pasado, que no han querido definirlas de ningún modo, son las que explicábamos ayer en los directos, tanto en Negocios TV como en mi canal en YouTube. Y aquí es lo que vamos a hacer a partir de ahora. De hecho, hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial, un invitado que yo hace mucho tiempo que conozco por lecturas y por sus reflexiones, por su filosofía y porque, como algunos dicen, es un opinador polémico, pero él se define como un opinador que dice lo que piensa, que al fin y al cabo es lo que vamos a intentar hacer aquí durante mucho tiempo. Vamos a meter en nuestros corazones a alguien que va a hablar lo que piensa, que eso hoy en día es difícil. Tenemos con nosotros a Axel Kaiser. Hombre.
Hola, hola.
Hola, Axel, ¿cómo estás?